Hey, welcome to the Thriving Minds podcast with your host, Walter Parada, where we strive to provide you with empowering talks so you can live to thrive. I hope you find yourself in the right frame of mind, focusing on all the things within your control. All right, so today's episode, we're going to be talking about understanding the brain. So there's still much to be learned about the brain as it's just very complex. But what we do know can help us understand ourselves better, and we can use that to our advantage. We'll look into key parts of the brain to see how it shapes how we experience things and ultimately understand ourselves better. So, the bottommost part of the brain is the brainstem, and sometimes this is referred to as the reptilian brain. It's responsible for the regulatory things. This makes sure your system is functioning well, so your lungs are breathing, your heart is pumping, your other organs are doing exactly what it needs to do without you having to tell it. You don't have to worry about it because it's on autopilot. Things like regulating your body temperature, and if you get a cold, it raises the temperature to kill the virus. This is the vital part that allows us to survive, where our sense of if we're thirsty, hungry, fight or flight, being territorial, reproducing, this is where these instincts kick in. The next part that we're going to talk about is the limbic system, and this regulates emotion, behaviors, motivation, and memory. All this helps to tell your body what to do based on what you encounter. It's that gut feeling that many of us rely on. So if you had great experiences at the beach, then each time you think about it, you recall on those memories that invoke those feelings of happiness. When you go there, you anticipate what happened in the past is likely to happen again. So you use those memories to help predict what might happen that helps you make decisions. And your emotions do play a role in that. While we might like to think that our decisions are completely rational, we draw on our memories to see how we felt and whether it's something we want to do or not. So for someone that's had a bad experience at a carnival, they'll tend to want to avoid going to one as the memory associated with it invokes unpleasant emotions. They'll expect it's going to happen again. The third part of the brain that we're going to touch on is the cerebrum, and this is responsible for your thoughts, actions, language, learning, and interpreting things. This is the largest part of your brain, and this helps you make better informed decisions. So like mentioned before, while we might think that the decisions we make are purely rational, we use how we felt based on the situation, recalling on our own memories, finding information, and using the two to think things through. That's going to help us forward. So if you never experienced going on a cruise ship, you'll use the cerebrum to analyze if that's something that you should do. You might ask other people about their experiences on their cruise, look at the things that might interest you on the cruise, and then you'll draw your own conclusions from it. Without this part of the brain, then you would always continuously do the same thing repeatedly, just doing what you know, which limits you. Looking at these three areas of the brain is a simplified way of understanding the different parts and how it functions. Just know that the brain is actually a lot more complicated than this. So the limbic system encompasses a lot more functions than just emotions and memories, and the cerebrum is more than just processing thoughts and information. They're all interconnected. There's many different lobes and other detailed parts of the brain that we're not going to get into because it's a lot of information and we want to keep it informative enough without getting lost in all the weeds. But this gives an idea overall of how the brain can be viewed. All these different parts interact with each other where one activates another. So if you get excited because you've accomplished a big goal such as getting into your dream school, it activates the reptilian brain where your heart beats faster because of a heightened emotional state. Or if you interpret something upsetting, like your favorite sports team losing a game, it activates the limbic system because your emotions were triggered where now you're angry or you're sad or even fearful. And that's all based on what you perceived. Or if you have a large cut where you're bleeding a lot, it activates the cerebrum that you need to assess how dire it is. And if it is dire, it can cause an emotional response of panic. These are examples of how one can activate another. It can go from top to bottom or bottom to top, and it shows their interconnectedness. Typically, when we're under stress, it causes us to make poor decisions because of lack of a certain resource, such as rest or food or an overload of a stimulant. The ability to interpret or analyze what's going on is diminished. This is the state where the reptilian brain overtakes the cerebrum's ability to do its job effectively. It can cause us to lash out at ourselves or anybody that's around us. So making good decisions in times like this is a lot more difficult. And if you do happen to make a decision in a state like this, it can cause urgency that can lead to panic. You'll tend to make harsher decisions that are impulsive. Think of you just had a long, hard day at work and you're under an intense amount of stress. And as you're driving home, you're facing a lot of traffic. You could be thinking about wanting to get home as soon as you can and just relaxing. This might cause you to tailgate somebody so closely that you're merely inches away from their bumper. And as traffic is moving along, you're stopping and starting, stopping and starting. It causes you to get closer and closer to the car in front of you to the point where, bam, you hit them. And now you got to deal with resolving this small crash. Poor decision, right? The closer you are to somebody's bumper, it's not going to get you that much faster to your home that makes it worthwhile. You might save a few milliseconds or even a few seconds, but because being under a stressful state, it causes that urgency of wanting to get home quicker. It kind of speeds up your internal clock, where your senses are really heightened, and it's a lot of information that your brain is trying to process. But if you take the opposite scenario of where you actually had a fantastic day at work and you're right in the middle of traffic, you're going to be in a better emotional state where you're more forgiving and patient. This can cause you to back off the car that's right in front of you. And if others are in a rush and they're looking to cut you off, you're more inclined to let them because you have that momentum of being in a good state. This is a place where you can make better decisions. You know that having distance between you and the other cars is going to allow you to get home at a reasonable time as you're avoiding getting into an accident. The few seconds that potentially can be saved are not worth the risk of being so close to the next car. The only difference between these two scenarios is a person's emotional state. Examples like this are why certain practices like deep breathing or meditation or taking time away from what's causing you stress are consistently emphasized. And it's for good reason, because they actually work, but only when you're actually committed to doing it. The cerebrum can regulate things for the better. This helps to minimize the reptilian brain from taking over, from wanting to lash out or fighting somebody. Just think in the scenario where the accident occurred, the person who got hit, if their reptilian brain takes over, they're probably going to want to fight you because you just hit their car. But the cerebrum can help regulate that and say, you know what? The best thing to do is to resolve this by exchanging information, calling the police to take down a report. These things are well known, but they are difficult to incorporate because in a way we're kind of fighting the instincts that want to come out that defend us. But a way to look at it is managing it for the better. Just think of all the things that we're not born knowing, yet we learned along the way. The things like how to walk, how to talk, how to read, how to write, how to even think about things. These are all things that we learned along the way, and we can also learn how to manage what's going on in our brains to better handle what we're going through. That's part of the internal self-awareness, to know what you're facing and how you're interpreting and feeling in that moment. Where you know if you're angry, you got to remind yourself to avoid making impulsive decisions and even interacting with certain people that might trigger you for the worse. It's knowing that people or the external things that are outside of your control are not going to accommodate you. So you got to adapt to the situation that you're facing. It's each and every one of us' responsibility for how we conduct ourselves, how we behave, and we got to constantly remind ourselves about that. It's understandable to lose our composure at times where we fall short of what we're striving for, but we got to be conscious of what we do and how we do it. If in the scenario where you had a stressful day and you're in traffic and you hit the car right in front of you because of that urgency to get home quickly, the police are not going to find a valid argument if you say, I had a stressful day and I wanted to get home as quickly as possible, and I didn't have anything to do with it, and I shouldn't be held liable. Or if you had to make your case in front of a judge in a courtroom, they're not going to buy that excuse. They'll find you at fault. Being self-aware in a moment like this can be extremely helpful, because it's you saying that, listen, I just had a hard day and I'm probably going to be in traffic, so I might as well put on some music that can uplift me, watch a funny video that makes me laugh, talk to somebody that can hear me out so I can decompress, and doing this all before actually getting in the car. This is recognizing when you could slip up because of being in that vulnerable state. This leads to getting better at handling the stresses, the challenges, the struggles that you're up against. These are constants that are always going to be present. So we might as well find ways to learn how to take them on and not merely expect that things are going to work out in our favor. The things that are talked about in stress management or anger management are really simple things that should be what you rely on to at least get you to a neutral state. When you can do this, the cerebrum is regulating the other parts of the brain from making a difficult situation worse. A great thing to know about our brains is that it's elastic, that we can obviously learn new things, and that our abilities are not set in stone. Genetically, we all have a starting point if we don't work on things. So let's say you're naturally good at math. It takes very little effort for you to do it well and to understand new material. But if you're not a strong communicator, that alone does not mean you can't be. It just requires greater effort on your part to develop that side. This helps to understand that we're not limited whether we have a certain trait or we don't. It's not whether you're smart or not smart, fast or not fast. That's that thinking in absolute terms where we become our own greatest threat. It's simply, how quickly do certain things come to us? Generally, if we're not good at something, or the longer that it takes to catch on, it gets us to think that I can't do this and I should divert my energy to something that's easy, something that I do well. If this does happen, then it starts to create negative memories associated with the thing that is hard. And each time you think about it, you'll be reminded to stay away from it. And that's where limitations come from. It's drawing on those past experiences to tell you how things are going to turn out. Know that you can get better at the things that you might be weak in right now. It just requires a strong commitment to continue to work at it, to refine your craft. With the right amount of work and figuring out how to get better, eventually you can. It just requires a build up to where you hit a breaking point. Just like running water in a plumbing system, when you turn on the faucet, there needs to be a high enough amount of pressure for water to come out. And getting better at certain things requires going through that state, that buildup of that pressure. So being aware that the limbic system stores a lot of your memories and regulating your emotions and how they work together, this might help you overcome certain fears or those bad memories that limit you. They do serve a purpose to remind us of being careful or to watch out for, but just acting alone on those emotions really keeps you stuck in place. To help overcome this, you can use those memories, those emotions that are invoked, and use that with your cerebrum, where you can really process your thoughts and combine the two for the better. A great example of this is investing your money in the stock market. Let's just say you started to invest your money, and within a year you see that the overall value of what you invested has declined by 40%. Without being self-aware of yourself and how the brain works, the inclination would be to pull out your money and never invest in the stock market again. You'll think that it's rigged or there's a Ponzi scheme or whatever it might be. The easy thing is to avoid that thing that caused you pain altogether. But you can use your own experiences with what happened, what you learned from it, and how you can apply that going forward. Maybe what you come to find out is the stock market is prone to experiencing downturns, and that's just part of investing. If you can see it through, then eventually you'll get rewarded. Or maybe you invested in bad companies and finally saw that. Or it could be a little bit of both. So the pain that you experience from losing the value of your money can help motivate you to learn more about why exactly that happened and how to avoid that while still investing your money. So you got to find some sort of purpose, some lesson out of each of your experiences, especially the bad ones, because it's going to help you be more resilient, where you can overcome a lot more adversity as opposed to just caving in. Now, as you process your thoughts of whatever happened and what went wrong, it's going to be uncomfortable. But getting through this is going to help you get to the other side of what you can do going forward, moving beyond just avoiding what you did altogether. There's that saying, nothing good or bad happens. It's all about how you interpret it. So the unwanted things that you experience, come to see it as what you gained, because you can use a lot of your own experiences and merge that with proactive thinking of how am I going to apply this for the better? If not, it just turns out to be an experience that restricts you because the fear of getting hurt becomes bigger and stronger. So take the time to process what you've already been through, and you get better acclimated to those uncomfortable memories, those uncomfortable emotions, where you're not reverting back to that reptilian brain of just surviving. And when these instincts do start to kick in, now you can use this to your advantage, where you can start to question, why exactly am I feeling this way of I'm only surviving? Look at what you're doing, where you want to be, and you'll see the gap in between, and eventually you can figure out the things you need to do to get you closer to your destination. Take a step further and really come to understand those things that trigger you to be in survival mode. The things that upset you, that makes you defensive, because it can feel like retreating or at least resisting that keeps you in place. Our brain serves a wonderful purpose for us to continue to go about our lives, but we got to use the limbic system and the cerebrum together to learn and develop and grow vigorously. It'd be foolish to rely simply on instinct. We got to constantly keep making progress, and sometimes that requires going through pain to do what is hard. Think of it like growing a successful crop to feed the masses. Cultivating a successful crop requires a lot of planning and proper execution at so many different stages. It goes beyond just plant and then wait a couple months to harvest it. That alone is a recipe for disaster. Too much or too little water, weeds, disease, insects, and animals are all looking to displace what you want to grow. A good farmer must know when exactly to prepare their land to plant their crop. If they plant too early or if they don't prepare the ground well enough, the crop is not going to establish well. Plant too late, and it can mean freeze occurring before harvest. Making sure proper drainage is in place, having disease and insect management plan, monitoring the crop diligently to see the progress, looking for nutritional deficiencies or other problems that can affect growth. The farmer must know the different stages of the crop so they can recognize what is ideal and what is an issue and how to correct it, or at least minimize damage at the right time. All these things are needed and more to produce a successful crop. And missing any one of these can threaten the likelihood of completing your goal. Our brains are like a crop. Understanding how it functions allows us to better manage ourselves. Simply left unattended, then things will be overtaken by what is experienced. So you got to be vigilant at every step to ensure that you prevent the brain from deteriorating to the circumstances. Know what it is that you're striving for, and then you can come up with a plan to get you there. From there, it's important to follow through. And what this means is knowing what it is that you're pursuing and why you're pursuing it. Just like those farmers, they're simply not hoping that they yield a good crop, but they know what they're aiming for. They have a specific metric. It could be 140 bushels of corn per acre or 11,000 pounds of rice per acre. And what you could be aiming for is a specific goal, a purpose, or a standard in which you do things. Part of what many of us face is self-pity at times when we fall short of what we're aiming for. And without rewiring or learning to better manage our brain function, it will go into self-preservation and abandon things altogether. So just think about things such as relationships. We're all going to go through some trying times, and when things are rocky, there can be a want to just give up on the relationship altogether because it could be too much to handle. Or if we think about the work environment, things could be going well and then going through some tough times, but is that enough reason to move on from it? It's one thing if the job itself is making you unhappy, but if you enjoy what you do, and at the first sign of a challenge, is that the time to cut bait? Because if that tends to be the case, where when things become difficult, then retreating could become a habit, because it is a bit wired into us. So we got to be able to counter that by reminding ourselves of the limbic system is doing its job to remind us of those unpleasant memories that is invoking that unpleasant emotion. You got to use the cerebrum, that part of the brain where you can think things through to get you out of that spiral of wanting to throw in the towel. This helps you recognize that the unpleasant things are there to motivate you to find a solution, to work through things, because when you can do that, you gain confidence going forward, which is just a reminder of when you're feeling bad about yourself, that the limbic system is just doing its job. It's urging you to get going, that you got to resolve this. Getting familiar with these components of how the brain operates makes you better self-aware that you can leverage it for the better. So when we're experiencing those unwanted emotions such as anger, disappointment, or sadness, that's not something that should be avoided, but instead embrace it. Figure out the source that's causing it and figure out how you can overcome it. The more that you can give yourself time to process this, especially those painful emotions, you get acclimated to it where it becomes less and less intense because you're able to regulate them a lot better think things through, and it's going to help you make good decisions. So we do make emotional decisions because every decision that we make involves some level of emotion. What we should aim for is to mitigate making decisions when we're in a highly emotional state, whether in a place of extreme euphoria or full of rage. It causes us to overestimate or blow things out of proportion. The brain is a very complex organ that is remarkable. I'm not here to try to explain all the details involved, their different functions, and how they're all interconnected, but hopefully enough information that is useful that can help you experience life a little bit better, or at least less difficult. Let's get out of our own way by avoiding being self-defeating and aim to uplift yourself, to be accountable to yourself, because it's going to be the difference in seeing things optimistically or pessimistically. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in more topics like this, become a Thriving Minds member at www.thrivingminds.live. It's your personal development resource so you can build that right mindset and live to thrive. All right, until next time.